Hello and welcome to this ITPro live session on building bridges in the cloud. I'm Maggie Holland, Group Editor and Editorial Director of the B2B titles at Dennis Publishing. That's Channel Pro, Cloud Pro, ITPro and the Business Briefing. And I'm delighted to be joined in this Q&A session with Rob Greig, CIO of design firm Arup. Thank you so much for joining me, Rob.
Thank you, Maggie.
Before we start, I think it would be great if you were able to just do a self-introduction to give us a little bit more detail about your role and the company that you work for, Arup.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Greig. I'm the Group Chief Information Officer for Arup. I'm responsible for digital technology within Arup. We are a firm of consultants, designers, engineers, and I suppose the most famous project that Arup is most well known for, of course, is the Sydney Opera House in Australia. We are a worldwide organisation with over 90 offices globally and over 16,000 employees. We work on between 15,000 and 17,000 projects a year of all sorts of scales. When I joined Arup, which was nearly 3 years ago, I never really understood. I've worked with Arup before, actually, on a number of occasions as a client. I spent 15 years in the arts, and I worked on a number of capital projects. And Arup was often either there as a structural engineer, as a fire engineer, those kinds of specialisms and domains. But then when you actually work for the organization, you find they have a huge breadth of engineering and consulting capability, and they work on everything. You know, when I first joined Arup, they have these journals, and I read all the journals backwards in time from 2017 to 1960. And just you can pretty much walk through any city in the world and point out projects where Arup has worked on them. Either that be railway stations, airports, tall buildings, hospitals, public buildings, you know, those kinds of things, and roads and rail as well. One of our big projects at the moment, of course, is HS2. We are, you know, Arup was heavily involved in the Hong Kong Macau Bridge. You know, those kinds of big scale projects, but also, you know, I've used Arup as a client for doing things like a fire evacuation survey for a building with 5,000 people. You know, so it's every range and scale that you can possibly imagine in our organization. And it's an organization that is an employee-owned trust, and it's built on a strong set of values founded by Sir Ove Arup. And those values around quality, being a humane organization, social responsibility, are right at the core of what they do, and they really mean that. And they pride themselves in being an independent organization that they have a choice about the work they do, which is quite a privileged position to be in, and that's because of its governance and how it's organized itself as an organization over the years. So yeah, quite a different organization in the space. And quite a remarkable engineering firm. And of course, I would be saying that because I work for them. But I've always been, in the last 3 years, continually surprised by the type of work they do.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction. So it certainly sounds like you've got a lot to keep you busy. I think it's an understatement probably to say that architecture is a very complex field to operate in, you know, made even more challenging when you add geographic spread to the mix, and no doubt even further complicated by the current lockdown, which thankfully is easing. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about how you've approached digital transformation using both the cloud and associated technologies within your own organisation, and then maybe relate some of that to the work that you've carried out around the globe?
Yeah, and I think this is the bit where I can put some things on the screen, isn't it? Just a bit of a story where we've gone, and the link back to the cloud. In terms of the breadth of Arup's work, it's not just big infrastructure projects and bridges that we design and build. We have a whole digital advisory business, developing digital services for clients, offering advice, everything from cybersecurity advisory right through to data analysis and big data. And so we've got quite a big part of our business is that advisory work that we do across the whole kind of spectrum of activities and domains within the built environment. So right from digital through to sustainability and everything that's connected in between. I mentioned just a second ago the Arup journals, and this is a picture of Arup's first computer, the size of a room under number 13 Fitzroy Street in London. That building is still there, it's still one of our buildings, but unfortunately the computer's not there. But that is the computer that was used to design and help design the structural engineering and analysis for the Sydney Opera House, and probably wouldn't have been achievable without that. And that kind of classic computing has been the mainstay of our sector for many, many years. And cloud is actually a relatively new entrant. When I arrived at Arup, we didn't have any services in the cloud. And today, 2 years on, 40% of all of our firm's workload is in the cloud. That's 40%. And our ambition is to get to 80% by the end of 2021. And that comes with it a number of challenges. But we see a number of benefits that come out of this. And of course, that has been brought into sharp relief by the recent COVID crisis and the need for so many people to be able to continue to do business while working from home. But the key principles of what we're trying to achieve with the cloud remain the same. You know, it's about delivering the services for our clients. It's about having a secure, agile, cost optimized and business enabling platform that is really able to respond to our needs and allow us to flex. And as I've said, more than ever has cloud demonstrated its value in that regard. Cloud has changed quite a lot over the years. I did my first cloud transformation. I started that in 2010, and Arup is my third major cloud transformation that I've led. And the whole world has changed since then. You know, when cloud first came along, things like data sovereignty, GDPR, data protection in multiple different territories and countries didn't really exist. And cloud technologies have had to adapt to the changing environment around us. In terms of what we're doing, I'm not going to go into any too technical detail, but we talk about internally the cloud house. So the components of a well-managed cloud platform, a multi-cloud approach is what we're taking. And the components of that, whether that be the data, the applications, the resilience, the networks, the governance and security around that, and the kind of outcomes we're looking for as we develop out these services into the cloud. And those services are either services that face our clients or services that enable our business to do the design work and consultancy work and advisory work that we do on a day-to-day basis. I was trying to picture where we've come from and where we're going to. And a colleague of mine did this picture, and I really liked it. So with these kind of organically grown on-premise systems, it's very, very hard to get to grips with the size and scale, the level of risk, who owns what, the quality of documentation, all those kinds of issues that IT leaders have to deal with on a daily basis, and turn that into something that is much more structured. And it has to be, because you're getting charged by the minute for those cloud services. And so we have to know what is the cost per minute per user of every application, and be able to provision those services rapidly and quickly. And so being able to understand our existing infrastructure that has organically grown, but quite literally from that photo you saw from 1967 right through to present day, kind of 2017, and take all of that and transform that to the cloud is not a small undertaking. And I know anybody that has been involved in cloud transformation will recognize that. But it's now really starting to deliver, and a lot of the work we do is very much around algorithms and mathematics. Many of it goes beyond me, but the outcomes we're now seeing is the design work we're able to do, and also the level and amount of data we're able to shift across the globe. We have a very big emphasis on collaboration across our offices around the world, making sure we have the best skills on the right job, delivering the highest quality for our clients. And a lot of the work we do in the design space and the engineering space is around building the visual models and testing those models within the digital environment. And those models often rely heavily on algorithms and what we call solvers at the very core of the tools that we use, these specialist tools we use. And often those tools are designed for the desktop. They're designed for a linear, what I call vertical stack computing, where if you want to make your algorithm run faster, and just to give you an idea, you know, some of these algorithms might have to run for hours or even days to give a single result, and then you might have to run it again, because these models have sometimes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of elements in them. And so the ability to do that obviously lends itself to horizontal scaling of the cloud, and many of the benefits we've seen is that ability to spin up many more instances of compute in the cloud than we can in an on-premise environment. But then there's some things that simply don't lend themselves to that. And so what we've been able to do is accelerate the delivery of the analysis work that we do, and also improve the quality. And I think that's the most important thing. We've been able to improve the quality of the output and the outcome from the analysis work that we do that goes into the designs, into the built environment. And then there's the future, and where we think we might be going. There are still some challenges remaining in the space. I talked about these mathematical challenges that I don't pretend to understand. But back in that 1968 journal, some of the challenges they faced then, we still face in terms of being able to calculate accurately, effectively, and efficiently, to be able to do more and more complex designs that the modern world is asking of us, and be able to consider all the different variables, including sustainability and environment, in those designs. And I think in coming into the cloud, there's a new opportunity which lends itself to this, and that is, of course, quantum computing. I don't expect us to all own a quantum computer in the future, and I very much expect that to be delivered as a cloud service. And there's a real opportunity within our sector in terms of the complex algorithms that we have to manage, of being able to use a mix of classic computing and quantum computing to be able to solve some of the long-held challenges with some of these long-form algorithms that we have to solve. So I think our cloud journey is twofold. It's very much about transforming our business and transforming our business into an agile business that's able to collaborate highly effectively across the world. And we have seen that, of course, with our response to COVID, but also be able to solve some of the more tricky and nuanced problems that come with the types of projects in engineering that we do. So that was kind of my quick, hopefully quick enough synopsis of some of the things we're thinking about in terms of our cloud work.
Excellent, thank you so much for that. If I could just pick up on a few of the points that you raised in your presentation, and then we'll move on to more of a deeper dive Q&A session. You talked about the cloud house there, a term that you use internally within your organisation. And I noticed that the foundation of that cloud house was very much ideas and opportunities, so not anything technology based at all. Is it the same as building a traditional house, that the foundation really has to be solid and then everything else is built on top of that? So you've got the ideas and opportunities at the bottom.
Yeah, we often talk about these ideas and opportunities of being either liquid, solid, gas, or gas, solid, gas, liquid, solid. I think there's some things that are ideas within the business around innovation or things we want to do that maybe the idea's there, but we've not really got an understanding of in the round how that's going to work. There's some which we would call gaseous. There's some things which are a bit more formed. They might be a prototype. They might be that kind of minimum viable product stage, and that's more liquid. We've got a better understanding of it. And then there are those things that are solid. We understand what the costs are. We understand what the opportunity is. We understand our route to market. And it's those kinds of things that are foundational in that regard. And it's having a pipeline of ideas and innovations that come through and provide that. But the trick, of course, with this is then having the platforms and services that can then deliver that either to our engineers and our designers and our consultants or to our clients. So that's the way I think about that bottom box.
Thank you. And you talked about collaboration, and speed and agility being really key. And I think that's something that all organisations have really had to intensify and focus on even more during the current pandemic, and how that's changed how we work. So how have you had to adapt the way that you're working around the world to the challenges that we face now, and what have you learned and what can organisations learn from those challenges and that adaptability for future challenges?
Yeah, it's been, I think anybody that's working in the IT space knows what it feels like because we've all been through it. It's been an incredibly busy, but also rewarding time. If we just put to one side, it's hard to, but put to one side the tragic loss of life and the impact on our economy and people's livelihoods, and just focus on some of the opportunities that have arisen because of clouds, particularly in the technology space. One of the challenges I think we have in any sort of technology adoption, introduction, or transformation is convincing stakeholders and users that this is the right way to go, and convincing people to change. And it is fundamentally all about change. And of course, what I think is one of Kotter's first laws of change, or rules of change in his 8 steps, is the sense of urgency. And COVID gave us that sense of urgency and became that catalyst that instigated the change required. And suddenly organizations are willing to have a higher risk appetite because their business must survive. They must be able to speak to their clients. They must be able to collaborate with one another. They must be able to share data. And I think that peels back some of those, in some ways, ill-informed perceived risks around using some of these newer technologies, and makes way for the realization that these technologies really have a genuine value to the business and they actually reduce risk. I think about classical computing on premise, and the perception sometimes I hear people say, oh, that's more secure than the cloud. And it absolutely is not. The cloud is, I am certain the cloud is more secure than a well-managed cloud, should I say, is more secure than a well-managed on-premise. I think some of the traditional concepts like air gapping are kind of, they're false securities in actually quite a dangerous cyber world. And you can apply that to many facets across the cloud technologies. So we went into lockdown. We had a Skype platform that had a maximum capacity of 4,000. There are 20,000 users in our environment. We decided on the Friday that we were going to roll out Teams across the entire organization. That was deployed by the Tuesday. If we had to, 5-10 years ago, if we had to rack up the amount of hardware and servers into data centers to enable that, we would probably still be doing it now. We had a plan to roll out Teams over a year. It was done within a week. And it's those kind of accelerations. If I think about some of our engineering tools, we've been investing in, there's a product that Arup actually builds and sells called GSA, which is a structural analysis tool. It's used on a lot of big building infrastructure projects for that structural analysis. We've been working on deploying that into the cloud because it and its competitors are very desktop dependent. And we'd only just got it up in the cloud and working properly. It had been up for a couple of months, and COVID hit, and we were able to deploy that for clients and also our partners, because some days our competitors are also our joint venture partners. And one day the same company can be our competitor we're bidding against, and the next day they're our joint venture partner in a different project. And so we were able to support and help. And one of the big challenges within the sector has been moving data between those partners, between those. You often have multiple organizations on these big infrastructure, multi-billion pound projects. You have lots of organizations in there, and there's often friction between those organizations in terms of securely transferring data between them. And I found this as a client, and I found this on the other side of the fence as well, being in one of those organizations. And immediately the cloud and the acceleration, and this is the good thing that's come out of all this, I think, all businesses have had to accelerate into the cloud, which has meant the language, the now narrative around this, we've got common ground, and people understand these technologies a bit more and how to get good use out of them. And I found sharing, our experience, Maggie, just ahead of this event, sharing has become much more easier in some ways overnight, because every organization has somehow either had to engage in Microsoft Office 365 or Google Docs or whatever it is. And I think overall that is a healthy outcome for us.
You talked there about organisations having to accelerate their journey to the clouds, and I know this is a topic that we've previously spoken about, is the evolution of the cloud. And my general thinking prior to our catch up, prior to this discussion, was that generally speaking, people's understanding of the cloud is and has moved on leaps and bounds since when people were asking what cloud is. But some, still feel there's a long way to go, and there's still a lack of understanding of certain areas. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm always surprised by the risk aversity towards cloud. Oh, who owns our data, and what if it stops working? What if it goes down? Surely we should have our own, so it's more reliable. And these kind of misconceptions about what cloud technologies are. In many ways, the word cloud. I really like the word cloud because it's not another IT acronym. It's just trying to describe in your imagination what this compute power is. But I still think we have some convincing to do to some of our users and our stakeholders. And that still is often a comfort with a certain way of doing things. And we see that with clients as well. And as I said about all of us having to come on the journey with cloud very rapidly over 2-3 months, our clients have had to go on that journey as well, which helps them and us. And I think that I still think there's more knowledge to be had and more understanding to be adopted around cloud services. And the way I describe it is there's been the democratization of technology, and that's gone really well. Once upon a time, to install a piece of software, you needed an IT expert to do it. Now you can download a piece of software on your device in seconds. You just go to the Apple store or the Android store and get it, don't you? Or wherever it is, whether you're on your smart TV or your laptop or whatever it is. What's not kept up with that democratization of technology is the democratization of the knowledge that needs to come with it. I remember doing, well, goodness me, this will be back in 2009, presentations to a group of execs, and I asked for a raise of hands of who in the room was using Dropbox, and that was the big thing at the time. It had just come out, and everyone was using Dropbox. And of course, the whole room put their hand up. And then I said, who in this room knows where their data is and understands who actually owns that data? And there was this kind of wry giggle throughout the room. And of course, that knowledge of this hasn't quite caught up. So I think there are, and we are still seeing in the cloud space, people making ill-informed decisions. I don't think that is a reason not to embark upon cloud, but it is definitely a reason to have the right patterns in place, to have the right knowledge and training in place. It is a profession in its own right in many ways. There was something I saw online the other day I really liked. NCSC, so that's the National Centre for Cybersecurity, have published a load of anti-patterns. And basically, they're all the things that you shouldn't do. And you read them and they're really familiar. And I think there's many of us can learn from those kinds of things and learn from each other. I think cloud technologies have changed significantly over the last 10 years. I remember the early days of it and how difficult it was to actually even get online and get a single instance up and running. And the number of services you quite literally had to lift and shift, what we call lift and shift. So basically take it and just duplicate a copy in the cloud, which wasn't really cloud, that was just hosting your infrastructure somewhere else. And now there's so many more services available. And also it's much easier to move from one cloud platform to another. And that's helping because that's increasing the competitivity of the cloud platforms. There's more services and offerings out there. It can only be good for technology users that competitive space remains.
I mean, you mentioned yourself that as a company, Arup sometimes finds itself working and partnering with companies that actually from the day before or the day after could be competitors. And I think in the cloud space, we've certainly seen a lot more of, and I hate the phrase, but I can't think of another way of explaining it, competition between some of the big cloud vendors and big tech companies, all working together to kind of try and deliver what customers ultimately want.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that we need to see more of it now. So in the compute space, I think they've got there. It's competitive with the kind of on-premise comparison, and it stacks up really well. I think where all the cloud vendors are struggling right now is on storage. Storage in the cloud for large volumes, multi-petabyte storage needs is very expensive, and it remains so. And it has come down a lot, but the vendors have got a long way to go before they really can attract people at scale to unless you have to have your data in the cloud for one of a host of reasons, I think that ultimately that kind of competitive cycle needs to continue for us to be able to properly adopt.
Absolutely. I mean, you've worked within your role at Arup, you've worked on projects all over the world, you know, in a variety of sectors. So how important has cloud and cloud tools been to enabling those projects? And are there any similarities in terms of the companies you've worked with and their appetite for cloud around the world or by sector?
Yeah, it's been really interesting actually, because the first time I did cloud was at the Royal Opera House in London, and they had a very specific need, which was basically 40% of their ticketing revenue is sold over 3 or 4 days of the year. And they have these big on sales, and 100,000 people turn up at their website all at the same time to buy the same seat. And how do you manage that at scale? And they used to have this waiting room, and several thousand people would sit in a waiting room for several hours, and you might get kicked out when you got down to number 10, and all this kind of thing. And we wanted to solve that. And we, at the time, you know, a lot of things were in their infancy. I remember we were doing things like Twitter operas and all this kind of thing, and you know, social media was a lot of fun in those days because everyone was exploring and innovating in this brand new space. And we decided to imagine a world where our digital audience was bigger than our physical audience, and how we would fulfill that. And that's where things like World Ballet Day came from, this kind of global event of ballet companies connecting together, of course, on YouTube, which is in the cloud in its own right. And I think that what the approach we had there was, we had a specific need that we had to solve, which was high volume transactions in a very short space of time. And economically, it just didn't stack up to build a physical infrastructure to manage that. Instead, we could have 300, 1,000 servers for 10 minutes to manage the volume and then scale them back down again to the normal level, whether that's 2, 3, or 10. Parliament, UK Parliament, it was a different kind of need. You know, UK Parliament produces more written content than the Daily Times every day, and records more live video than the BBC does every day, which is just getting your mind around that level of live content. And that content needs to be credible, it needs to be secure, it needs to be published really quickly to the public domain. And it meant that the cloud lent itself to that for those reasons. Come to Arup, and there's a different set of challenges. Those challenges are about an organization that's globally distributed, has to go through a number of regulations to get the things done that it needs to do, and they vary from country to country. And it has a very diverse business in terms of lots of different disciplines working together, this kind of approach that we aspire to, which is total architecture. And its challenges are around collaboration at scale with very big models that I talked about earlier, but also around dealing with these algorithms that I talked about earlier as well. So it's a mix of a collaboration challenge and a mathematical challenge. So 3 very different organizations with 3 very different needs that can be solved by cloud platforms. But I also think, Maggie, that the cloud companies have had to change significantly over the last 10 years. If you just take data sovereignty as an example, that wasn't a worry in 2010. Yeah, we had the Data Protection Act in Europe, but still, it wasn't the same level of concern. We didn't have Chinese cybersecurity law, we didn't have the Turkish Data Protection Act, we didn't have GDPR, and the whole plethora of other laws that are now in place. That is actually, I think we've become a less global society, and there's more protectionism and nationalism happening. And bizarrely, we see that reflecting on our technology now, and we've got cloud providers like Microsoft having to implement multi-geo, this kind of being able to geolocate your data within a single tenancy in different parts of the world to try and solve some of these problems, when 10 years ago we didn't have that challenge. And so in many ways there's been I've read about some organizations coming out of the cloud because of some of these challenges they face, and now the cloud providers are responding to that with new and different services to solve that.
I mean, you mentioned, data sovereignty there, and I think, from the conversations I've had with CIOs like yourself and some of your peers in other job functions, not even just focused on IT or transformation. That's definitely, you know, something that wouldn't say it keeps them up at night, but it's definitely something that's front of mind when they're looking at who they work with in terms of technology.
Absolutely. I think and that's at the very center of our multi-cloud strategy. You know, you will have seen on the slide, Alibaba's on there. If we've got specific needs in China, the other cloud providers have not got feature parity in China compared to the rest of the world. And if we had a need, the point that we have a need for providing services to clients, we might go to a different provider that can provide us the feature set that we need within that locality. And that could be the same in North America or Europe or anywhere else. And so I think it's the multi-cloud approach allows you to have a choice about where you go to solve the right problem in the right way.
You mentioned during your presentation, Rob, the 80% goal of workloads in the cloud by 2021. Obviously, 2021 is not that far away now, so that seems quite ambitious. I'm guessing that's probably a main focus for you right now, is kind of, you know, delivering on that vision. So kind of, I'd imagine there's a lot of complexity involved and a lot of other stakeholders involved in helping achieve that. So would you be able to, without giving away any secrets, maybe give us a little bit more insight into why you've set yourself such a lofty goal?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't think it was that lofty, because that was set. I joined at the back end of 2017, and that goal was set in 2018. So we are, you know, we're in our second year now of a 3-year plan. UK Parliament, when I was director of the digital service, we went from 0 to 97% of our workloads, 97% in the cloud within 2 years. So we went even faster. As I've already pointed out, global organizations have different challenges, data sovereignty being an example. And also being able to negotiate contracts in a global way. I still find technology vendors have a challenge with that. There's still these kind of parochialisms and localisms that makes it very hard for them to deal with a global organization in a global way. You know, that you often find they want to set up contracts in each different region. And of course, that doesn't help us from an agility perspective. So there's those kinds of things that slow you down a bit. But yeah, we've set up a program board. We did a lot of groundwork initially with an organization called Clarinet to help understand what we had. And I have, in 20 years, I've still never seen an on-premise IT set of data centers which were fully documented and clearly labeled. And so that's been a bit of a process to get through all of that. So understanding how big the problem is, you know, how big's the elephant? And sometimes you find it's not one elephant, there's a herd of elephants, because of course you lift a stone and you wish you never lifted the stone, and then you find another one and you just keep going. We've done some of the easy stuff first. We aimed on some quick wins. We aimed on some demonstrators as well to show in some parts of the business a cautious business in some of these things. You know, we've got to remember these are engineers designing life systems. You know, bridges, once they're built, have to stay up. You know, we can't, you know, there's a kind of tension between digital and physical design. And that tension is, in digital, in most cases, you can iterate. Fail fast is a principle, isn't it? Roll forward, not roll back. You know, all those kind of things. You're looking at your rework rates. You're looking at, you know, that kind of iteration and of development. And we see that all over the place. We can't get away with that with a multi-billion-pound railway. You know, it has to work first time. And so there's a healthy tension between those two things. And I think that we have to convince people and ensure that people have confidence with these technologies that can be actually very, very different. So that was the first thing for me. And there's some key things along the process. I think that the concepts of FinOps now, financial operations, has become much more mainstream. But right back in 2012, we were discovering how to refine our systems after our developers had left all the servers on 24/7 for 3 months, costing us a fortune. You know, and of course you know that I think it's still the case where cloud is generally more expensive unless you manage it. So I think that FinOps thing is a really critical component from day one. And then training and skills. When I joined Arup, I think there were 7 people with cloud skills, internally facing. I mean, cloud skills, not the consulting and advice we do, but the internal facing cloud skills. And I think in 2016 you couldn't even connect to a cloud from the internal network because it was designed as a traditional classic network. Now we have well over 200 people with cloud skills and cloud capability, and that's growing every day. So I think they're the 2 key things. And we're now talking about, in terms of our technology operations, in the kind of traditional IT outfit, you've got compute and storage, the people look after your servers and your storage and all that sort of thing. They're your cloud engineers of the future. And so how do we take them on that journey to cloud? And then we really want our first and second line people, our client services, your IT support people, to be able to provision cloud services. Today they can provision a laptop. Tomorrow we want them to provision a virtual desktop in the cloud. And that virtual desktop technology has been critical to us. We've been able to deploy workstation class. When I mean workstation, I mean graphics cards, high memory, high CPU capability in the cloud during COVID, so our engineers can continue using those high-end visualization and design tools, which until previously they'd had to have been in the office, sat at a workstation, an expensive workstation to use, and now we're provisioning that by the cloud. So I imagine all of our people having to go on a journey with their own skill set where, yesterday they were provisioning workstations and physical hardware and installing, the classic network install of Windows or whatever it is. The future, it's going to be provisioning a cloud solution for people in real time.
You talked about journeys there for your individual employees, people that you work with, and obviously a lot of people talk about digital transformation as being a journey. You mentioned yourself about you pick up one stone and you find something else you've got to focus on. So aside from cloud, what other key ingredients do you think need to be added for digital transformation success?
Yeah, I think what is digital transformation? It's business transformation with a big digital component. We're only talking about this today about how we measure our success. Do we measure innovation? Do we measure the changes to our organization? Do we measure how we impact our clients, or what different clients we may have, or how our clients are transforming? Our ambition is to be the digital leader within the built environment. That's a really clear ambition. Our strategy, the group strategy for Arup, is all about sustainability, and we recognize that digital has a really important role to play in that, multifaceted throughout the whole kind of cycle of sustainable development. We also recognize the world is changing, and it's going to change forever. I think there's suddenly been a bit of a coming of age for IT. I've seen IT in the years go through cycles of one day they're flavor of the month because they're bringing innovation to the business, and next day they're perceived as a cost. And I really hope this time, given the response, given what I call these unsung heroes, there are the key workers, aren't there? There's the health workers that have done such an amazing, incredible job for our countries all over the world, saving lives. There's those kind of unexpected heroes, which are the people working in the supermarkets and keeping core services up and running, have quite frankly risked their lives to keep our society going. And then there's some invisible ones, and I think the IT folks are those, the people that have deployed these services at speed and kept businesses running. It's probably saved millions of jobs globally, actually. I can't imagine what this would have been like in 2000. I think it would have been far more catastrophic in terms of economic impact and impact on people's lives, and possibly even loss of life as well. So I think that IT professionals have really shown their value to businesses around the world. And I think I would say woe betide any organization that forgets that quickly. And so it's now, how do we springboard from that? How do we think about the services that we offer, whatever it is, however analog it used to be, what is the digital by default way of doing this? if we were going to do it, what would be the digital way? And I don't just mean do the analog thing in the digital way. I mean step back from it completely, look at it and say, if we were starting this from scratch with the tools that we have now experienced, either through the last few years or through this crisis, how would we do it now? And that's different. And coming to this is the long way round to answering your question, I think, Maggie. Ultimately, it comes down to people. And I think digital transformation can only be achieved if the organization goes at its scale, and or the majority, I'd like to say all, but majority of people within that business or organization are inspired by what digital can offer, are engaged in it, understand they have a lot to learn, but feel they're supported and empowered by their business, their firm, their company to go on that journey and learn things. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I know digital because I can do X, Y, Z, but the deeper you go, the more you realize you have things to learn. And I think the hardest thing for people is challenging the status quo. And that's what digital transformation is always doing to us. It's always challenging us to be different. In our sector, we've been disrupted quite late, or disruption really hasn't come. You know, if you look at other businesses, whether that be banking, whether that be media, television, taxis, you know, all these kind of, particularly the B2C element has been heavily disrupted by digital. The built environment, less so. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think some of it I've already kind of described, these complex algorithms. It's very low margin in the built environment, in the architectural engineering and consultancy sector. And it's highly regulated in terms of health and safety, in terms of building regulations and code and that kind of thing. And that can be quite expensive. And also you have to have a lot of domain knowledge. So, but it is coming, and Arup wants to be one of the digital incumbents in all of that.
Fantastic. Well, I'm afraid we are out of time, sadly, Rob. I think we could spend a lot longer talking about this topic. It's been absolutely great to speak to you. Thank you so much for sharing, you know, your story and some of the journey that you've gone through so far with both yourself as an organisation internally and also with your clients. So thank you again for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for your time.